That afternoon felt strangely hollow. Not loud, not dramatic, just empty in a way that made every small sound stand out. The refrigerator's low buzz. A bird calling somewhere outside. The slow ticking of the wall clock. I sat alone in the living room, flipping through a magazine without absorbing a single word. The pages turned, but my mind didn't move with them. Ryan was out of town again. Another work trip, another quiet house. That part didn't shake me anymore. It had become routine. What bothered me was the silence. It felt heavier than usual, like it was pressing in from all sides. Almost without thinking, I checked my phone, hoping for a message, a notification, anything. The screen stayed blank. No missed calls. No new texts. Just my own reflection staring back at me. That's when the thought surfaced. How predictable my life had become. What once felt stable now felt confining. Safe but airless. I cared about Ryan. At least I believed I did. But somewhere along the way, affection had slowly blurred into habit, and habit into distance. The change had been so gradual I never noticed it happening. Then a sharp sound broke the quiet. A car door closing outside. I looked up and walked to the window. A familiar figure stepped out and headed toward the house. Lucas. An old family friend. Someone Ryan trusted without question. Confident, relaxed, the kind of person who always looked at ease wherever he stood. I opened the door surprised. Lucas? What are you doing here? Ryan asked me to grab some documents he forgot, he said with an easy smile. Hope I'm not bothering you. Not at all. Come. The moment he stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. The house didn't feel quite as empty anymore. Lucas set his bag down near the table and glanced around with an appreciative nod. Still looks great in here, he said. You always had an eye for detail. I laughed lightly. Flattery won't help you find paperwork. What exactly are we looking for? Blue folder. Probably somewhere Ryan thought was obvious, which means it could be anywhere. We moved into the office and searched together, opening drawers, checking shelves. The task was simple, but the company made the room feel smaller, warmer. Conversation came easily, easier than I expected. He told a story about a delayed flight, a broken coffee machine, and a stranger who turned the whole gate into an audience. I caught myself smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time all day. When he finally found the folder, he held it up like a trophy. His sleeves were rolled back, and a tattoo curved along his forearm, something I'd never noticed before. New? I asked without thinking. He glanced at it and smiled. Old actually. You're just seeing it now. Guess I am. We drifted back to the living room instead of ending the visit there. That was the first small choice, the harmless one. I poured water, and we sat across from each other, still talking. His stories were animated, warm, alive. The kind that pulled you in. Without realizing it, I felt lighter, more present, like the fog of the afternoon had quietly lifted. For a few minutes, everything else faded. The silence, the distance, the routine. Then it happened, small and accidental. As he reached for his glass, our hands brushed. Just a second of contact. Nothing more. But the sensation landed sharper than it should have. I pulled my hand back too quickly and gave an awkward laugh. You okay? He asked. His voice was casual, his eyes weren't. Yeah, I said, standing up. Just a little warm in here. I walked to the kitchen, telling myself the space would reset everything. It didn't. I stood at the kitchen counter longer than necessary, rinsing a perfectly clean glass just to give my hands something to do. My thoughts felt louder now, harder to ignore. I told myself it was nothing, just an awkward moment, easily forgotten. But awareness had already changed the air. When I turned around, Lucas was leaning lightly against the doorway. Not intruding, just there. Watching, thoughtful, quieter than before. You seem different today, he said. Different how? I asked, keeping my tone steady. He took a moment before answering. More awake, he replied. Like you're actually here instead of somewhere else. The honesty in his voice unsettled me. It felt too perceptive. Too close to something I hadn't admitted even to myself. You should probably get going, I said gently, avoiding his eyes. Why? He asked, not moving. The distance between us felt charged with everything neither of us was saying. Not action, just possibility. And somehow, that felt more dangerous. "This isn't a good idea," I murmured. "I know," he said quietly. "But it feels real." For a split second, the room seemed to narrow to that single moment. A choice forming unfinished. My instincts told me to step back, to put space between thought and mistake. Footsteps sounded at the front door. The handle turned. Reality rushed back in. We both shifted away at once, the tension breaking like a snapped thread. Voices followed, familiar, cheerful, unexpected. The house filled with sound again, and the moment dissolved into normal conversation and polite smiles. A few minutes later, Lucas picked up his bag. At the door, he glanced at me once, an unreadable expression, then left without another word about it. Nothing had happened. And yet something had changed. Some moments don't matter because of what we do, but because of how clearly we see how close we came. After the door closed, the house returned to its familiar shape. The same furniture, the same quiet, the same afternoon light resting on the floor. But it didn't feel the same anymore. Awareness has a way of rearranging things without moving anything at all. I sat back down on the couch and tried to return to the magazine. The pages blurred. My mind replayed the moment in the kitchen. Not what happened, but what almost did. The pause. The nearness. The honesty in his voice. It would have been easy to rewrite it into something harmless. A misunderstanding. A passing mood. But the truth was more uncomfortable. It mattered because I felt it. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A message from Ryan. "Meetings ran long. Might be another day. Miss you." I read it twice. The words were kind. Familiar. Distant in a different way. I started to type "miss you too," then stopped, noticing how automatic the reply felt, like a reflex instead of a feeling. I erased it, waited and wrote it again, this time meaning it, or at least choosing to try. That evening, I took a long walk alone. The air was cool, the streets calm. I let the rhythm of my steps settle the noise in my head. Temptation, I realized, isn't always about wanting someone else. Sometimes it's about wanting to feel seen, heard, awake again. What frightened me most wasn't Lucas. It was how easily I had recognized the part of myself that leaned toward the warmth. By the time I returned home, the conflict had softened into something clearer. A boundary not crossed is still a boundary kept, but only if you admit it was real. I turned on the lights, filled the quiet with music, and chose deliberately to stay on the side of the line I could live with. The next morning arrived gently, as if nothing unusual had passed through the day before. Sunlight stretched across the kitchen table. The coffee brewed. The clock kept its steady rhythm. Ordinary, almost deliberately so. But I wasn't quite the same. Awareness leaves a mark. Not a wound. More like a quiet underline beneath certain truths you can't unread. I understood now that distance doesn't begin with betrayal. It begins with silence left unattended. With feelings postponed. With conversations replaced by routine. That afternoon could have become a secret. A hidden chapter no one else would ever see. Instead, it became a mirror. That night, when Ryan called, I didn't rush the conversation. I didn't give polished answers or automatic reassurances. I spoke slowly, honestly, about the quiet, about feeling overlooked, about missing the way we used to really talk. There was a long pause on the line, not angry, not defensive, just thoughtful. "I didn't know it felt like that," he said softly. "I know," I replied. "That's why I'm telling you now." Nothing dramatic followed. No grand speeches. Just a longer conversation than we'd had in months. Open, imperfect, real. Some moments test us not to make us fall, but to show us where we're weak, and where we still have a choice. I came close to a line that day. Close enough to respect it more than ever. And sometimes, that's the quiet victory no one sees. The step back, the honest word, the door gently closed before it ever has to be slammed. If you enjoy stories about temptation, restraint, and the small decisions that shape our lives, stay with us. The next story might feel even closer to home.